The winding mountain road surrendered entirely to darkness, swallowed by an ink-black night that offered no stars, no moon, only the hungry void beyond the reach of my failing headlights. My gifts had long since died, the signal choked by the oppressive peaks. Panic, a cold tendril, began to coil in my gut. I was utterly lost, my fuel gauge mocking me with its descent towards empty. Then, through the swirling mist, pinpricks of light appeared. Hope, fragile and unexpected, flared. A village. It wasn't on any map I owned, but then maps rarely captured the truly forgotten places. I limped the sputtering car down a narrow, unpaved track. The air grew colder and heavier. The lights resolved into a cluster of houses, huddled together like frightened sheep. The village felt ancient. Its stone walls and timber beams weren't smoothed by centuries, or perhaps just a different kind of time. There was no signpost, no welcoming beacon, only the dim glow spilling from curtained windows. As I parked near what looked like a small, silent inn, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, thin, dressed in plain, dark clothes that seemed out of fashion by decades. He approached with unnerving slowness, his face indistinct until he was just inches from my window. "You are lost," he stated, his voice flat, lacking any real inflection, yet strangely resonant, like stones rubbing together. "Yes, completely," I admitted, relief pouring with an accent uneasy stirred by his peculiar presence. "My car and I have no idea where I am. Is there somewhere I could stay the night?" He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "We have room. The travelers often find us when they have nowhere else to go." He didn't smile, but his eyes, dark and deep-set, held a disturbing, placid calm. He introduced himself as Thomas, the innkeeper, and led me inside the Hollow Crown, a name that felt less regal and more empty. The interior was Spartan, yet strangely clean. A few other figures sat in the main room, nursing monks by a dying fire. They all wore the same simple clothes, possessed the same quiet stillness, and their gazes, when they landed on me, were unnervingly blank. Thomas offered food as simple bread and broth in their room. The food had little taste, and the room was bare, save for a narrow bed and a single, unblinking oil lamp. Sleep refused to come. The silence of the village was profound, unbroken by wind, animals, or the distant hum of anything living. By morning, the unease had solidified into cold dread. The sun, when it finally filtered through the thick mist that perpetually clung to the valley, offered no warmth. The villagers were already about, performing simple, repetitive tasks with silent efficiency. I tried asking about the nearest town, a road out, a telephone. Their answers were always vague, circular. "The road is there," they'd say, gesturing vaguely towards the mist. "Or we have all we need here." Questions about their past, about the village itself, were met with polite, vacant stares or a change of subject. I decided to try leaving on foot. I told Thomas I needed to find help. He simply watched me, his dark eyes holding that unnerving placidity. I walked down the track he'd arrived on, towards the mist. The path felt wrong. The trees lining it seemed to twist inward, their branches like skeletal fingers. After what felt like an hour, the mist grew thicker, colder. I pushed through, expecting to reach open road or forest. But instead, I emerged back into the clearing where the Hollow Crown stood. The village. I had walked in a straight line, yet ended up back where I started. Every path leading away from Ashford Hollow seemed to loop back, or dissolve into impassable fog. A chilling thought took root. This village wasn't a place you found. It was a place that found you, and it didn't let go. Desperate, I began searching. I crept into the small, neglected churchyard behind the church. The gravestones were ancient, illegible, but behind the church, tucked away, I found a small, recent monument. Not a gravestone, exactly. A polished stone, oddly shaped, with a single inscription etched upon it. Here waits those who sought the boundary. Below it, crudely scratched, was a date, last month. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable presence. I turned. Standing at the edge of the graveyard were the villagers. Not just Thomas, but all of them. Their faces were still placid, but their eyes were no longer merely blank. They were voids, pools of utter darkness that seemed to drink the light. They began to advance, slowly, silently. The ground underfoot felt strangely yielding, like damp earth. The mist around the village pressed closer, swirling with unseen shapes. It wasn't just fog, it was a barrier, a living skin holding the village contained. I understood. They weren't keeping me in. The village itself was the trap. And the inhabitants. They weren't people who lived here. They were people who tried to leave. I ran, not towards the paths, for I knew their trick. I ran into the dens, unnaturally still woods surrounding the village. Branches tore at me, but I barely felt it. Behind me, I could hear, not footsteps, but a soft rustling sound, like dry leaves skittering over stone, and that flat, resonant voice of Thomas calling, "Stay." It is easier to wait. The woods thickened. The light vanished entirely. I tripped, falling hard onto cold, damp soil. As I looked up, the trees above seemed to warp, twisting into impossible shapes. Through the branches, the swirling mist formed into vague, shifting faces, their expressions empty, waiting. The rustling grew closer. I scrambled back, but there was nowhere to go. The village wasn't the place within the world. It was a scene, a tier where the lost were caught. And trying to escape didn't lead out. It led deeper into the very fabric of the trap. The figures emerged from the trees, their forms hazy in the gloom, their eyes the only distinct feature at twin points of absolute blackness. As they surrounded me, the cold seeped into my bones, not just from the air, but from their touch. My thoughts began to slow to blur. The fear receded, replaced by that same, unsettling calm I had seen in their faces. My limbs felt heavy, rooted. I looked back towards the village, at the faint lights in the mist, and felt a strange, hollow sense of belonging settle over me. The waiting, yes, it was easier to wait,